Okay. We
Three, two.
got we got Worm Boys. I gotta stop saying that because that's the name of that podcast, isn't it?
Uh, oh, I guess it is,
I
isn't
feel
it?
like I'm stealing your gimmick accidentally, and like we're not nearly as good as that podcast, and I say it every time.
I didn't even think about that.
Worms are here is gonna be the new phrase.
Worms are here.
Everybody do the worm. Uh,
There you go. Everybody do the worm. That'll be our phrase.
it's gonna catch on real good with the worm audience. Worm's a very light-hearted show, so
Yeah. So we
that'll
haven't
catch
done
on.
this in a while.
And it's so much so that I thought we were going to do two chapters today, but then I forgot that I read two chapters in the previous week, so we actually got four to do.
Yeah, I think the first one is 11.7. I think
It's 11.7, that's correct.
that rhymes.
Yeah. And it's the one where they're escaping the merchant death rave.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. I guess it's where the bulk of the combat is, which
Which, as you know,
yeah.
big fan.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't think we need to focus on the combat a lot because
I did have some questions I wanted to throw at you, just because
yeah,
as you were, it's been so long, and you know that I don't remember anything about 11.7, basically, and I feel like some of this might relate to that. Not
yeah,
11.7, Arc 7 in general.
yeah. In any case, with any chapter that's mostly combat, we probably won't talk about the combat a whole lot just
I'll talk
because
about cool plays that I liked,
yeah, there's some cool plays. What we're probably here to talk about more would be
plot
any
progression and character
any plot
progression.
progression or character beats that are interspersed within it.
So with this, with 11.7, I had a question where Taylor says that Labyrinth is scarier when she's not on her side. She was on her side during Leviathan. Is that correct?
This was a long time ago because you would have read it a long time ago. It was back during her second round against Lung.
Okay,
Uh,
yeah, it was right. They teamed up. She also teamed
yeah,
up with Neuter back then, right? And she
she did
saved
this.
them.
She did this crazy stuff where she like makes the ground look like a checkerboard, and then squares start towering up into the sky. And
Her
she makes like an escape route in the ground.
her power. It's is it illusions or real? Because there's a scene where Gregor the slime or the snail is moving through her stuff, and I got kind of confused there because I thought it was physical.
Yeah, and you're in the same boat as our characters right now. I think in both instances that Taylor would have seen Labyrinth, she's tried to figure out if they are illusions or if they're real.
Okay, deliberate.
Um,
I like that. I was
yeah,
very off and like thrown off by it because the effects of it seem real. Like it was tossing people around and trapping people.
yeah, you're in the same boat as the characters at this point.
Well, good stuff. Um, Taylor's out here fully exposing her identity to the minions. She's not very good at that these days. It'll come back later too.
Yeah, and I'm trying to wonder how much of that at this point is because she doesn't have much of a
Family to go back to at this
just
point.
yeah, I don't know if she really has a civilian identity she can go back to anymore.
She mentions that like she doesn't want to go full out with it because she likes to hold on to like a thread of hope that she could go back. But even she's aware that like this is a slim chance.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing is I really like when Taylor asks Trainwreck to open the way for her, and he kind of like he doesn't because he's playing double agent and he doesn't confirm it, but he opens the way anyways, and we're like, okay, that's interesting. I'm assuming he's still like double agenting for Coil.
Yeah, he's like we got it's weird. He's like I'm like, oh, he's a double agent, but then like in the back of my mind, I'm like, wait, is he like a triple agent or a quadruple agent? Like, what's going on here?
There could be a lot of layers here. I won't think about it for too long.
It's funny because I'm looking at it. She straight up asks him like, okay, are you still working for Coil or like
She's
what?
not subtle about it.
Yeah, she's like, I need to know if you're gonna kill me.
And another thing that came after that was the aftermath of Scrub's power, which was big murders where Bryce is alive, but like he lost his hand, and Thomas is dying, and Taylor leaves him to die, which I felt like was supposed to be a big moment. But like in that scene, I was like, this is the most justifiable walk away moment. You got to get out of here. The guy's not a good person.
Yeah, and I think that moment is what this chapter is for. I think that's like
It's
that's probably the key takeaway of this chapter is her making her first ever decision that, because at this point she still hasn't killed anybody per
Right. I
se,
feel like
but
this is definitely here to start feeding into her first kill.
yeah, she made the decision to let someone die. And you're definitely right. If there was ever a moment to walk away, this might be it.
Like it was just not the. I thought the fact that she was trying to save Charlotte was already a lot for the situation. So it's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think
this
the
has been a really messy scenario they went through, and like this isn't. I don't feel bitter or like negative towards her walking away from that.
yeah, I never really held it against her walking away in this moment. It's, if anything, I was more I wasn't really sad that she left someone to die. If anything, my takeaway was, now that she's actually done this, what does it open the way for her to do in the future? Um,
From the
and
vibe I
one,
get, very bad things, but I guess we'll see.
well, I guess we'll see. One thing that I thought was really interesting about this moment that I never actually thought about it when I was reading, but I saw it in a comment, is that particularly with leaving Thomas alone there to die, just a few chapters ago, um, when she initially saves Charlotte, and she's very much on Charlotte's side until she learns that Charlotte had been there on the day that Taylor was in locker, and she was a bystander, and she just left Taylor there. And then Taylor loses pretty much all of her sympathy. She's like, "Oh, you're one of those kind of people. You would just leave someone there." Um,
Ooh,
and then, yeah, I never made the connection. Someone in a comment was like, "Oh my God, that's what Taylor did. She left someone behind who needed her help that only she could have helped."
Taylor bad. Who would have
Betty
thought?
bad, but like actually
But
bad.
bad, not the cool way.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last thing to note about this chapter before we move on is that there was a briefcase with some files that I'm not even going to begin to theorize about. I couldn't get anything out of those. I made some big theories about the super dimensional worm beings, but I got nothing here.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think if this is the first we've actually seen this like cauldron related stuff.
The
Uh
word cauldron has come up, but that's not the prison, is it? That's another thing.
yeah, the birdcage is the prison.
Birdcage, yeah.
Um Cauldron may have been dropped before as this sort of secret organization, but this is probably more details on it than we've ever seen before.
And even then, I didn't really know what to make of the details. So for this one, I'm gonna just ride along with it, see where it goes.
I think that's a good call.
Which brings us to 11.8,
Which is probably the shortest chapter out of this bunch, I
which
think.
we were like. Um, so this one starts off with Taylor just kind of intimidating when she's talking to Charlotte, because she's not very nervous about this girl knowing about her identity at all, which is unnerving to think about. Like she's so embraced being a villain and maybe having to intimidate this girl into doing what she wants her to do in order to keep both of them safe, I guess, because she knows if the girl is going to give away her identity, she's gonna have to possibly die. So she's like, hey, let's just work it out right now.
Yeah, and Taylor kind of like Tyler. I said Tyler. Um,
Sure did.
Charlotte at some point even says like, "Okay, well, what if what if I told people who you are?" Um, and Taylor does threaten her. She's like, "Oh, well, then I guess you might have to die." And I don't buy for a second that Taylor would actually kill someone for doing that. But I think she is doing some very deliberate like threatening here.
She's a villain. I don't know. She'll do some weird shit. She's got bugs.
She got bugs. She in there.
um so one thing that didn't register, so she's revealing her identity to everybody at this point. So it's like, sure, everyone in this room, which is all of the Coil guys, Charlotte and Bryce, are all just gonna know your ability, and the Bryce's sister, whose name escapes me,
Yeah,
Sierra, yeah.
yeah. Taylor is she is burning a lot of bridges the further she goes into this kind of warlord position she's in.
At an astounding rate, I'll say, like professional level bridge burning here.
Yeah, she's a demolitionist.
Another a thing I did notice like when I was first reading Coil stuff is that he has 9 territories and 9 villains. Uh, and we know that there's 9 bad guys about to show up at some point.
Oh boy.
So I have to wonder if each single character is going to have to handle one of the Slaughterhouse 9. Um, that feels too neat and organized, but like that's a tournament arc.
Yeah.
But in a
Like
bloody sense.
we're about to get into the Slaughterhouse 9 arc after this chapter,
Yes,
and
we are.
I think I've said it before where I think the entire premise of the Slaughterhouse 9 and why they're there is more interesting than anything we've had up to this point. Um,
Yeah, which
it's
the
not just
reasoning it's actually come up before. They're trying to recruit.
Yeah, it's not just like, hey, we made this villain mad and everyone has to stop them, or it's not, giant monsters killing everybody. They're here to recruit somebody, which I think one, it's just interesting on a normal level, but also on a character level. I think I think a member of this group nominating you might say something about you as a person, or
Yeah.
it opens the way for character development in a way that we haven't seen yet.
I feel like this is setting out for a lot of battles for people's souls. Battle for people's humanities,
Yeah.
which will come back in a few minutes here when we get there.
Yeah.
But
So I'm not sure how much left there is in 11.8. It is very short.
there's some other things to mention where Taylor gets some recruits. So Lisa is like, hey, this guy's gonna babysit your brother and you can call him whenever you want. And I'm like, that's not realistic. That would get so annoying.
Yeah, I think they're really trying to just like placate her in the moment.
It's this is the kind of thing like Worm has. I wish I kept track of it because I have nothing to back up what I'm about to say. But Worm has these moments where people make deals that are like very plot convenient, and if like I don't know, they make deals where it's like that's not reasonable for this Sierra girl to be calling this gruff army man bodyguard to check up on her brother all the time.
Yeah, and
And
it's not a
she says
reasonable.
at any time, it's like you can call him anytime and check up on your brother, and you can stay here. They're doing so much for these people, and it's like it's very convenient. And of course, I don't think it's gonna end up in the worst case scenario where they walk away or like I think they're gonna be loyal for now. That would be my read. So it just feels convenient at the moment, but maybe it'll turn into something later.
Yeah, if at this, I remember when I was reading this at this point, if anything kind of eased my nerves about like Sierra and Charlotte being her henchmen, it's that if I recall, whenever like Sierra went into Taylor's base, she was kind of like amazed. She's like, "Oh my God, there's running water and food and
Yeah,
electricity." She
it's a
like
big
really did
deal.
not want to leave. So I
I
think for the time being, I think she'll probably stick around there.
and then the chapter ends with Gru and Taylor making up a little bit, and then with the faded words of everything might just work out.
Yeah, the universal language
The,
for we're about to start the darkest arc in the
we're
entire.
about to fucking put a death flag on an entire arc.
Yeah,
So
and then we move into like
interlude
one of the
A.
best chapters.
This is this is one of the best chapters in all of Worm so far. This
Yeah,
is straight
holy,
5 out of 5.
it is amazing. So let's
Um,
get into it.
let's get into it. It's bitch is going through her solo venture of colonizing her area. Basically, she does it alone because she uses her dogs and she doesn't like to work with people. Reasonable, I mean, for her character.
Yeah, she is like deliberately setting things up so that her henchmen will fail in air quotes, so she can get rid of them.
Because
And
she doesn't want to be with them. She wants to do this with her dogs, and she
she wants to
doesn't
be
need
alone with
people.
her dogs.
Which it's just this is a really well written chapter where like this is one of the stepping stone moments where you're like, oh, Wild Bow's writing has really improved over time.
Yeah, I've said it to you before where like I had liked this story already up to this point. But the first time I read like this and the following chapter, I was like, I think this is my favorite story.
It's
Um,
I can see why you would get there, and I'm not quite done with all the interludes, but they've been real choice so far.
yeah.
Something
Um,
I really liked about this chapter is just bitch talking about how she feels in sync with her dogs while she's like on top of them riding them.
Yeah,
and she's like, "This is a kind of rush that no one else can feel, and it's really unique. But how come I'm still jealous of them?" And like that level of introspection from Bitch is something I really needed, and like something that just added so much depth to her character without feeling forced. You could really see that that's how she's been, but she never outwardly shows it. It was just really good.
yeah. Like we finally in her head, and we realize that throughout all this time, we've always seen her be very kind of brash and abrasive in these conversations, and she's fully aware, but to her, she just doesn't
She doesn't get it.
understand where people are coming
The
from.
fact she's been aware of it all along really sold it for me.
Yeah, she just has this really inherent nonverbal understanding of her dogs and what they try to communicate, and she just doesn't get that with people.
And
Um,
another part is like you get to her backstory, and it's probably the best prose and like writing, and it was just so fitting. It's some of Wildbow's finest work. It ran that like barrier of being almost too much, but it didn't reach that point. Like it was pretty much perfect. I
yeah,
really liked her backstory.
like it was a very sad backstory, and
I mean, it had
I
to be. It's a
remember
trigger event after all.
I remember when I was originally listening to the We've Got Worm podcast, and they got to this chapter. They're like, "Man, that was a really sad but good backstory." But man, if the dog would have died, I think I would have just closed my browser right there. That would have been too sad.
Oh, I'm sure it's a past dog, so it's
Yeah,
fine.
we can't have dogs just dying all the
One
time.
Piece has very much prepared me for sad backstories, so this just
Yeah,
bounces off.
glad she got to keep her dog who murdered her horrible foster mother.
That was fucked. It's just so much fuckness.
But man, like I think also in this chapter, while we're on the order of while we're on the note of just how I guess
Good it
equipped her
is.
mind is for these dogs, um, she drags these people out of the building in her territory, and I think this is actually right after her reflecting on her past. She drags this man and his family out of this building because they were in her territory. And he is like, okay, how are we supposed to know we weren't supposed to be here? And she's like, she's like incredulous. She's like, what do you mean? You heard the dogs howling. And he's like, okay, well, how am I supposed to know the howling means leave? And she just doesn't understand. She's like, how do you not know?
I really liked that. I actually wrote that down. She was like, "If you can hear the dogs howling, you're not supposed to be here." It's
Yeah.
just by default she expects people to get it.
And this is it's kind of like when we were talking about Arlong Park in One Piece, where I had compared Arlong and Yoshikage Kira, which are obviously two very different characters, but a kind of trope they have that I really like is they do these monstrous things, but in their mind, like they don't understand how they're being the asshole. Like what they're doing is just natural to them.
Which is very much what Bitch is going through right now.
Yeah, and here, like, she's in her mind, she was totally fair. She gave them fair warning. She's like, the towels mean leave, and they weren't gone. And she just doesn't get how these people don't know.
She is overall having a much worse time at this than Taylor. Which, speaking of Taylor, this is possibly the best part of the chapter, where she talks about how for a little bit there, Taylor was able to fill that void that she has in her heart for human connection, and then she realizes it was a ploy and that it was betrayal. And this completely makes the act that she did, I think, last arc, where she throws her into the containment foam, it makes it so it makes so much more sense now. And the fact that she feels guilty about it really seals the deal. Where it's like, man, this is really good right now.
Yeah, because it's like it
It's
make
really
like
compelling.
even before now, like I guess obviously it would have made sense that you know Rachel's mad that Taylor tried to betray her, but up until now, like we didn't realize how much that really hurt her.
It really puts it into context, and then it's like, wow, she felt it was totally justified for her to do that. But then she reels you back where it's like, and I feel really bad about it. I wish I didn't do that. It's weighing heavy on me. So it's like, for a second there, it was completely justified. But then the fact that she feels guilty just makes me feel even more bad about the situation. And I hope that they can become friends in one
Yeah,
day.
because like up till now, like I don't think we would have ever had the vibe that Rachel is someone who would feel bad about what she had done there. Um, but she kind of has this introspection and um, God, I love Rachel a lot. She's one of my favorite characters. She is my favorite character in the story.
In the last portions of this chapter, so we can wrap it up.
Yes,
Zebra woman shows up. I don't remember her name, but I like how
yes,
Glory Girl just fucking fucks off as soon as she sees her. So it's like,
yeah. I want to
oh,
talk
it's
about
like
that
that.
beat, the Siberian, and I
Yes,
think this is a really good example of how a character not saying anything can say a lot because Glory Girl and I think she's here with Brandish, which would be a family member of hers, but like they are vocalizing a lot during their initial fight with Bitch, but when Siberian shows up, they don't say anything. Like she doesn't go, "Oh my god, that's the Siberian. She's blah 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 and does this." Like she doesn't even say run.
they
Like
just insta leave. They
yeah,
know.
the moment it registers in their mind who this is, they get out as fast as they possibly
Really,
can.
really like that. And then
Um,
you get the Siberian casually killing a guy by just sticking her fingers into his eye sockets, and then the dogs bite her, and she's like, "Oh, this is cute."
yeah,
She just doesn't care.
and that's the thing with as far as murder goes in this story. Um,
That was
we've seen it.
really
We've
brutal.
probably seen it more in Arc 11 than we have
Oh, for sure.
in any other place besides maybe Leviathan.
No, this is more than Leviathan. Like Leviathan was kind of like there was some plot armor there. Like
Yeah, and I guess
people were
most of the death there
surviving
is
the attacks, and like it was rough for everyone. Like there was danger still, but like this is on another level. This arc.
yeah, because even people like Lung or Bakuda who would kill someone, they don't do it just for fun. Like even
For
Bakuda had explanations where she isn't going to kill all of her people, obviously. She's doing it to this one guy so the other ones will be scared enough of her to follow her. But Siberian has, she's blasé about murder in a way that we haven't
ooh,
really seen up till
blase, you say?
now. Blasé.
Very good. Um, just something that was interesting about her is just how graceful and seductive she is. And you find out she's trying to recruit bitch, which, oh great. So speaking of battle for people's humanities and souls, this is about to get real good, and I'm very excited to see where this goes.
And God, the entire interaction with them is just so perfect because the first half of this chapter is bitch just kind of like self-reflecting and thinking about the fact that she's never been able to really connect or understand people. She can't read them and no one really gets her. And then this person shows up, the first person maybe in her life who she just totally gets and who gets her. And whenever they talk, she knows this person's telling the truth. And this person happens to be a monster.
I
And
posted a meme on our chat that pretty much summarizes everything about that last interaction.
oh god,
It's
that's
perfect.
a good one.
It's the Daisy. You ever wanna go ape shit? I'll link it. But that's basically this chapter in a nutshell. This is one of the best chapters so far. Probably like second or first. It's up there
Yeah,
with the Regent one for me personally.
it it's really interesting. I think pretty much every event that happens in this chapter is pushing Rachel to believe that she might actually belong with these Slaughterhouse 9 people because she reflects on the fact that she doesn't understand these people she's with, how it's much harder for her to work with people than be free and wild by herself with her dogs. And this person shows up who she does understand, and we get it works as a really good metaphor, but it's also just good tangible in the story where she's gifted this wolf pup from Siberian who is not the domesticated, friendly, civilized air quote version of a dog that she usually uses her powers on. And she notices when she uses her power on this wild, free, more violent variant of a canine, it's easier. She's always used her power on dogs before, and she kind of says that when she does, she might kind of get exhausted for a moment. They're kind of asymmetrical. It takes a while for it to happen, but it's just easy and natural when she uses it on this wolf. Um, and I think that plays into what Siberian was saying, where wouldn't it be so much easier for her if she just broke these connections and let herself be
Go ape
wild,
shit,
go ape shit?
as they
So,
say.
um, I think this chapter is just like a big siren, like, hey, we're gonna do some character development with this person.
And I
Um,
am excited.
yeah, so man, I really
Which
love this chapter.
this leads us into Interlude B, which doesn't really have any characters that we care about
Yeah,
as
because
much. But
I
this
think,
was such a good chapter as well.
man, the first few, I think, paragraphs where Theo is just like describing the television set is probably the one of the best ways I've ever seen someone set the tone for a chapter.
You know how I was talking about how I really want Worm to be a Netflix series?
You could totally see. I like, yeah, I
This
visualize it.
chapter adapted as a Netflix live action show. There is so much you could do here with the runny faucet in the background, the entire
Oh,
scene, and just casually kind of looking over to the blood, but not like mentioning it until later in the scene. Oh man. Oh,
like I can just see like this shot where Theo's like looking at the TV, where you could use like kind of some close-ups with a fisheye lens and like a different color scheme.
there's the
Just kind of,
baby crying in the faucet, and he's just looking at the TV, and he gets snapped out of it. It's just writes itself.
yeah,
It's
I think
so good.
we really get we set the tone perfectly in the beginning here.
And that's really all that there is to say about this chapter. Like the tone is incredible. Like that's what carries the chapter. It's so tense. It's basically a hostage situation between Jack Slash, which is an interesting villain name. Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
And how he came to this guy's house. He's there because it was Kaiser's son, right? And he's
Yeah.
trying to get Purity.
Yeah, and this is kind of the interesting two characters to look at because we haven't seen this is the first we've ever seen Jack, but I guess that's fine because I guess we're looking at the Slaughterhouse 9 people now. Theo has only appeared once in the story so
He
far.
did. I thought it was brand new.
He appeared for like a paragraph in Purity's interlude. I
Wow,
think as she was leaving the apartment, he's
that's
like, "Hey, can
crazy.
you babysit Aster?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever."
Wow.
Um,
Um,
so that
that's
was a
really
character I
interesting.
never expected to see again.
By the end of this chapter, everyone loves Theo. This is a Hayato moment
You are
right here.
really rooting for Theo. You're like, "Oh my god, I want so much for him."
Because throughout the chapter, it's like around halfway through, the impending doom starts rising so much faster as Theo realizes, oh, I am going to get killed at the end of this chapter.
Yeah, he even vocalizes that, and when he does, I got this lump in my throat, and I felt like I was him.
And there's the tension of like Purity coming up the stairs. What should be like a heroic moment. It's like, oh, I hope she gets here so she can save him.
But
I'm
you're more
like,
scared.
I hope she doesn't get here because what she's going to see is going to be terrible. And she's like a neo-Nazi, so why do I even care? A lot of conflicting emotions here.
That's a good point because in any other scenario, you'd be waiting for her to get there so she can save the day. But in this scenario, you're
I'm
wait,
dreading it. It's a
yeah,
timer for disaster.
yeah. You're like, when she gets here, I'm going to die.
With the phone ringing and Jack doesn't see it and it's just building and building and building. This was a masterclass in tension and suspense right here.
Yeah, I think that's the like I enjoyed this chapter anyway, but I think the biggest strength is really for getting you into Theo's mindset here.
And you end up with this 2-year deadline to become a badass. fucking poison rings in JoJo's Part 2 showing up.
Yeah, and this is one thing I really like that Jack is in this story. He is the chaotic evil.
And
That's what he
he
is.
got some of his philosophy across this chapter where he talks about, I wonder how many people we touch with our lives every day and how many people we influence.
Yeah, one thing I like about him, because I think any chaotic evil needs some kind of more unique personality trait to make them just not a mindless monster. And Jack is someone who can postpone his, I guess, desire for bloodlust. He says, if there's anything I do, it's because I find it interesting. And I feel like a lot of just like pure evil people in fiction, like at the thought of this deal, they would have just been like, "Oh no, nothing's gonna save you," ha ha ha. And he's like, "You know what? You know what? That actually sounds really interesting. I think this would be really cool." He's like, "If you can get powers and fight me, I'll let you live right now."
I feel like I feel like that's not an uncommon setup.
Yeah,
I just brought up an example of it.
yeah. I'm not gonna say no other villains would do it, but
It's executed well. That's what matters here.
yeah, I like Jack better for it.
Um, and you know how it might have been on the Discord, it might have been on a podcast. I was like, I'm not super sure if the Undersiders were the best people to follow in this story, but I guess by default, out of all like the crews, they're the most interesting. I guess they have the most diversity. Fuck all that. I wish Worm was about Theo. I want to see his 2-year progression.
Well, I wonder if we'll see more of Theo in this story.
Will we,
um,
Bradley? Will we
yeah, I
see
wonder if
more
we will.
Theo?
Man, I'm scrolling through it, and this one particular line where Jack is Theo tells Jack that, if you weren't killing me here, I'd want to be a superhero. And Jack's like, okay, so let's say in this scenario, what would you do to people like me? And Theo says he musters up this courage that he would never have if he wasn't sure he was going to die anyway. And he's like, people like you, I'd kill, sir.
So good,
And
man.
man,
I think that might be another. It's at least a 4.5, maybe another 5. Probably
yeah,
the third best chapter in Worm.
yeah,
That's 2 of the best back to back, mind you.
yeah. 11.A and 11.B are two chapters that I reread all the time. I really love these two, especially just like one. I think they're good in their own right, and I really like reading them now that I've finished the story, just because I know where these threads eventually go to.
Oh shit! I can't wait to see. Oh man, Theo better not fall into. It's gonna be bad.
No, I don't
He's
know.
gonna be like a Jason Todd, like Red Hood, but even darker and edgier.
Try and be optimistic, Willer.
No, what are you talking about? This is Worm.
Try and be
Anyways, that's what we got for today. I gotta revive Joe. Hey Joe, I got a gold orb for you
Hey,
from Devil May Cry.
God, it really does remind me of Battle Tendency with the poison ring.
I think Joe's dead.
Oh man.
Joe, come back. Oh, he's gone. We
God.
gotta take a break, folks. I gotta go give him his gold orb. There he is. All right.
Okay, sorry. My dog peed in the house, I think. So
Oh no.
I'm glad we gave you plenty of time to clean it up.
God, Willer, these interludes.